Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that's not in the headlines. It's not trending. It doesn't get a standing ovation. But it's real and it's raw. There is a strength in brokenness that the world cannot manufacture. There is a grace in scars that no smooth path will ever teach. And there is a story, a powerful, breathtaking, holy story, when a woman walks through pain and doesn't let it define her, but lets God refine her. She wasn't born strong. She became strong, not by choice, but by necessity. Life hit her hard. Loss, betrayal, fear. Nights where sleep was replaced by tears and mornings that started with numbness instead of hope. She didn't ask for the weight she carried, but she carried it anyway, through cracked smiles and silent prayers, through storms that didn't stop because she was tired, through the kind of loneliness that doesn't leave when the room is full. But see, here's the miracle. Not that she was never broken, but that her brokenness didn't break her. It brought her to the feet of her Creator. It brought her to the edge of herself, where faith begins. Because sometimes when everything falls apart, that's when you fall into the arms of the one who's been waiting. Quiet, patient, present. She didn't know it at first. She thought silence meant abandonment. But over time, she realized it meant God was working. He was rearranging, healing, peeling back the lies she believed about herself, about her worth, about her past, about what she could never be. And right there, in the ashes of was, he started building something eternal. Not out of perfection, not out of performance, but out of surrender. Because God doesn't need your polish. He just needs your permission. She found her voice not because she was unshaken, but because she learned to speak through the tremble. She learned that her tears were not weakness. They were prayers. She learned that her story wasn't too messy, too late, too far gone. It was exactly the kind of story God uses. The kind that speaks to other women hiding in shame. The kind that reaches into dark places and says, me too. But look what he did. She didn't bounce back. She rebuilt, brick prayer by prayer. Some days with bold faith. Some days just with breath. But always moving, always trusting. Even when it didn't feel good, it was still working for her good. Because when God writes your story, no chapter is wasted. Not the broken waiting ones. Not even the ones you want to rip out and forget. Every line is grace. You see her now, and you think, she's strong. But strength came at a price. It came through the fire. But the fire didn't consume her, it refined her. It burned off the fear, the pride, the need to please everyone but God. What's left is something holy, something untouchable, something blessed. She's still becoming, she's not finished. But she knows now being broken doesn't disqualify you. It prepares you. Being knocked down doesn't mean you're done. It means God's about to raise you in a way that can't be denied. The blessing is not that she was spared from pain. The blessing is that God never let go, not for a second. So when you hear her story, don't just hear pain, hear redemption. Don't just see the fall, see the rise. Don't just focus on what she lost, look at what she gained. Wisdom, peace, purpose, a walk that's deeper, a faith that's unshakable, and a testimony that sets others free. This is not just her story. It's every woman who's dared to believe that her past doesn't define her, that God is not finished, and that being broken is not the end, it's the beginning of something blessed. There's something deeply misunderstood about brokenness in our world today. We live in a culture that idolizes strength, perfection, done, and self-sufficiency. We scroll past images of filtered smiles and polished victories, rarely pausing long enough to notice the silent cracks beneath the surface. But what the world views as weakness, God sees as readiness. Done. Brokenness isn't a flaw in his eyes. It's The very condition that invites his presence in. Done. When something is broken in our hands, we tend to toss it aside. If a vase cracks, we discard it. If a phone stops working, we replace it. That's how we've been conditioned to equate brokenness with uselessness. But God doesn't work like that. Done. He sees what's broken and doesn't throw it away. He moves closer. He bends down. He picks it up and begins to do what only he can do: restore, renew, done, and repurpose. You see, brokenness makes room for God. As long as we think we have it all together, we leave no space for him. Our pride, our independence, done. Our belief that we can handle life on our own, those things build walls. But brokenness tears the walls down. It cracks open our hearts. It softens us. It humbles us. And in that vulnerable, raw space, God enters in, not to judge, but to heal, not to condemn, but to redeem. Done. There's a reason why some of the most powerful stories in Scripture begin with broken people. Moses was a fugitive with a speech problem. Done. David was an adulterer and a murderer. Rahab was a prostitute. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Paul persecuted Christians. These were not polished heroes. They were flawed, fractured, deeply human individuals. And yet, done. It was precisely in their brokenness that God began his greatest work. He didn't wait for them to become perfect. He didn't wait for them to get it all right. He used them as they were, and through their brokenness, his glory was revealed. Done. There's a level of intimacy with God that can only be reached through brokenness. It's in those moments when you have nothing left, when the pain is too heavy, when the tears won't stop, that you come face to face with the reality of who he is. Not just a distant deity, not just a theological concept, but a loving Father, a rescuer, a restorer, a God who sits with you in the silence, who holds you in your suffering, who whispers truth over your shattered soul. Brokenness also strips away what's false. It peels off the layers of identity we build around success, done, image, or control. When life falls apart, so do our illusions. We realize that we are not invincible. We see that we are not in control. Done. And in that sobering moment, when all we thought we had is gone, we find the one thing we truly need: God himself. Done. And that's when the rebuilding begins, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi. When a piece of pottery breaks, instead of throwing it away, they repair it with gold. The cracks are not hidden, they are highlighted. The broken places become the most beautiful parts. And isn't that what God does with us? He doesn't just glue the pieces together. He fills the cracks with his grace, his love, his strength. And the result is not a return to who we used to be, but a transformation into someone entirely new. Done. Some of the most profound moments of growth in life don't come in times of comfort. They come in times of pain. Done. It's through the breaking that we learn to trust, to let go, to lean in. It's in the empty spaces that God pours in his Spirit. Done. Brokenness becomes a doorway to intimacy, a catalyst for transformation, a fertile ground for something holy to take root. Done. God specializes in using broken people for powerful purposes. Throughout history, both sacred and personal, done, the pattern is unmistakable. God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And often, done, those he chooses to use in the most extraordinary ways are the very ones the world has written off. The ones who have been through the fire, done. The ones who've fallen and failed. The ones whose past reads more like a cautionary tale than a success story. Yet somehow, done. It is precisely those stories that God rewrites into testimonies of transformation, redemption, and purpose. Done. He takes the broken and breathes destiny into their cracks. The idea that brokenness disqualifies us is a lie that keeps too many people stuck in shame. But in God's economy, it's often the very thing that sets us apart for divine assignments. Where we see damage, he sees depth. Where we see failure, he sees foundation. God is not limited by our mistakes, and he often uses them as material for his miracles. There's a reason he chooses the lowly, the rejected, the overlooked, because their stories give him room to shine. They don't steal his glory with pride or pretense. They know who brought them out. They remember what it felt like to be lost. Brokenness brings a kind of clarity that success never can. When you've walked through storms, you speak with a different authority. You don't just preach hope. You've held on to it with trembling hands. You don't just quote peace. You've cried out for it in the middle of the night. That kind of authenticity doesn't come from ease. It comes from being shattered, surrendered, and then slowly rebuilt by the hands of a faithful God. And it's those hands that prepare you to reach others. Not with empty words, but with a heart that's been there. We see this truth woven all through Scripture. God used Joseph, betrayed by his brothers and thrown into a pit, to save a nation. He used Naomi, bitter and broken by loss, to help birth the lineage of the Messiah. He used Gideon, hiding in fear, to lead a small army to victory. Time and again, God's choice confounds human logic. He doesn't recruit the polished. He recruits the willing. He doesn't require perfection. He requires surrender. What makes broken people powerful in God's hands is not their strength. It's their dependence. It's their awareness that they can't do it without him. That humility becomes their covering. That weakness becomes their weapon. Because when God steps in, he doesn't need your resume. He doesn't look at what you've done. He looks at what he can do through you. And often, the more broken you are, the more room he has to move. Less of you means more of him. God's purpose isn't derailed by your past. It's often shaped by it. The pain you've walked through becomes the very thing he uses to reach others. That addiction you overcame, it becomes a bridge to someone still stuck. That heartbreak you survived, it becomes empathy in action. That betrayal that almost broke you, it becomes a lesson in grace, a message of resilience. Nothing is wasted in his hands. Every scar has significance. There's a reason Jesus chose disciples who were ordinary, flawed men, fishermen, tax collectors, zealots, not religious leaders, not scholars, just people, broken people, people who doubted, stumbled, and sometimes got it wrong, but they followed. They said yes. And in the hands of Jesus, their imperfections didn't disqualify them. They became the backdrop for the greatest story ever told. The same is true today. God still uses the unexpected. He still works through the underestimated. What the enemy meant to destroy you, God will use to develop you. What others thought would end your story, God will use as the beginning of something greater. Your past does not intimidate him. Your struggle does not shock him. He already factored in every detour, every misstep, every fall. And still he says, I want you. He sees what you can't. He knows what he placed in you. And he's not afraid to get his hands dirty lifting you up and setting you on the path he prepared just for you. I've done. There is power in knowing that your brokenness doesn't disqualify you from purpose. In fact, it qualifies you in a way that polished strength never could. Because when people see your life, they won't say, look at what she did. They'll say, only God could do that. And there is something about walking through pain that alters how we see the world. It slows us down, strips away distractions, and brings things into focus in ways that comfort never can. Pain has a way of forcing us to look deeper, not just at the situation around us, but at the condition within us. It pushes us past the surface, beyond the noise, and into the heart of what truly matters. In the middle of heartbreak, disappointment, or loss, we begin to ask different questions, wrestle with different truths, and discover perspectives we never saw when life was smooth. Perspective doesn't come cheaply. It's earned in the dark. It comes in the midnight hours when prayers feel unanswered and the silence is deafening. It comes when everything you depended on falls apart and you're left standing in the rubble with nothing but raw faith and unanswered questions. But it's in those places that God begins to speak in a deeper tone. He doesn't always remove the pain, but he uses it. He molds it. He turns it into something sacred. And slowly you start to see through a different lens, not just with your eyes, but with your spirit. There are things you learn in suffering that you simply cannot learn any other way. Pain humbles us. It teaches us compassion. It makes us more aware of the invisible battles others carry. A person who's never struggled might offer sympathy, done. But someone who has been wounded offers something more. Empathy, understanding, presence. They don't try to fix you, they sit with you. They don't speak in cliches, they speak with authority born from experience. That kind of wisdom can't be taught in books. It's carved into the soul by experience. When you've been wounded, when you've walked through the fire, you gain insight that becomes a gift to others. None. You begin to recognize pain in someone's eyes even when they're smiling. You pick up on what's left unsaid. You know how to pray with depth, none. How to listen with intention, how to walk with someone in silence without needing to fill the space. That's not something you get from ease or comfort. That's a gift pain gives if you let it. It doesn't come all at once, but over time, your wounds become the well from which wisdom flows. Even Jesus learned through suffering. Scripture says he was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. He didn't avoid pain. He entered into it. And in doing so, he taught us that there is purpose in pain. That suffering isn't wasted. That wounds aren't meaningless. Done. He showed us that brokenness can be holy. That mourning can lead to comfort. That crushing can produce oil. He wept. He bled. He carried the weight of humanity, not because he had to prove anything, but because he wanted to redeem everything. When you've suffered, done. You no longer see others as projects to fit as people to love. You become less interested in being right and more interested in being real. You stop needing to have all the answers and start offering your presence instead. You become a safe place because you've lived in unsafe places. You become light not because you've never seen darkness, but because you've learned how to shine in spite of it. Pain can also sharpen your focus. Things that once seemed important suddenly lose their power. You learn to let go of ego, pride, and the need to control. You start to see beauty in simplicity, peace in stillness, joy in small things, strength in just making it through the day. You learn to listen for God's voice in the quiet, not just the noise. You realize that your value isn't tied to your performance, your possessions, or your status. It's rooted in who you are and whose you are. Wounds have a strange way of becoming windows. They let the light in. They soften you. They open you. And though they may leave scars, those scars tell stories. Not of defeat, but of survival. They are reminders that you've been through something and you didn't quit. They become sacred markings, not of shame, but of strength. And over time, what once felt like a curse becomes a wellspring of wisdom you carry forward into every conversation, every relationship, every decision. It's not easy. It's not painless, but it's real. And in that realness, something divine happens. Pain strips away the false and leaves what's true. Wounds clear away the noise and sharpen what matters. And out of the ashes of sorrow, perspective rises. Not a shallow optimism, but a deep, grounded clarity that shapes how you love and how you lead. There's a light that creeps into hearts early, sometimes planted by rejection, by failure, by by words that should never have been spoken. The lie says you have to be perfect to be loved. You have to have it all together to be worthy. And for years, many people carry that weight, trying to earn affection, acceptance, approval, sometimes even from God. They strive, they perform, they build masks to cover their flaws, hoping no one sees the cracks underneath. But the truth is, God never asked for perfection. He asked for surrender. Perfection is an illusion. No one truly has it. People may present it, may wrap themselves in accomplishments and image, but underneath it all, there is always something they're carrying. Always something unfinished, something uncertain, something broken. God is not impressed by perfection because he knows the heart. He sees beyond the surface. He's not drawn to our polish. He's drawn to our honesty. He doesn't need you to pretend. He wants you to be real. Surrender is not weakness. It's not giving up. It's giving over. It's saying, I don't have what it takes, but you do. I can't fix this, but you can. I'm tired of trying to earn what you're freely offering. That's the kind of heart God responds to. A heart that comes open, raw, and willing. A heart that doesn't hide behind performance, but steps forward in faith. That's where love meets you. Not after you've cleaned yourself up, done. Not after you've checked every box, but right in the middle of your mess. There's something holy about reaching the end of yourself. It's where grace begins. When you finally stop trying to impress God and start trusting him, something shifts. Done. You realize you were never created to carry it all. You were created to walk with him through it all. The weight was never yours alone. His love is not a reward for your good behavior. It's the starting point. It's the foundation. It's the one thing that doesn't change, no matter how many times you fall. Done. In the story of the prodigal son, the son didn't return home perfect. He came back dirty, broken, ashamed, rehearsing apologies in his head. Done. But before he could even finish his speech, the father ran to him, embraced him, and welcomed him back with celebration. That is the heart of God. He's not waiting for your flawless return. He's running to you the moment your heart turns back toward him. Done. That kind of love doesn't make sense to the world, but it's real. It's relentless. It's redemptive. People often think surrender means losing control, and in a way it does, but not in the way you might fear. Done. It means releasing control that was never really yours to begin with. It means trusting that God's hands are more capable than yours. Done. That his plan is wiser, that his timing is perfect even when it feels delayed. Surrender is not about giving up dreams or desires. Done. It's about aligning them with the one who gave them to you in the first place. Done. It's about letting go of the pressure to be everything and trusting the one who is everything. God's love is patient. He knows the process takes time. Done. He's not pacing heaven, waiting for you to meet some impossible standard. He walks with you, gently leading, guiding, correcting, not with condemnation, but with compassion. He celebrates progress, not perfection. A small step of surrender matters more than a giant leap fueled by pride. Done. When you open your hands, when you offer what little you have, he takes it and does more than you could ever imagine. There's power in letting go, in saying, here I am, flaws and all. Because in that place, God begins to move. That's where healing starts. That's where peace grows. Done. That's where identity is restored. Not in what you do, but in who you belong to. You stop striving and start abetting. You stop performing and start receiving. And you begin to live not from a place of fear, but from a place of freedom. Done. The enemy will always try to convince you that you have to earn love, that you're not enough, that your failures define you. But God's love speaks louder. It says, you are mine, I choose you, I see you, I love you still. Not the curated version of you. Done. Not the cleaned up version. You exactly as you are. That's what makes grace so radical. It meets you where you are, but never leaves you there. Done. It lifts you, carries you, transforms you, not because you performed perfectly, but because you surrendered fully. Done. There's a rhythm to life that we all come to know. And part of that rhythm includes falling. We fall into mistakes, into wrong decisions, into silence, done into fear. We fall out of alignment, out of peace, out of trust. No one is immune to it. Falling is part of the human story. Done. But what makes the story sacred is not that we avoid the fall. It's what happens after. What defines us is not that we never stumble, but that when we do, we know where to land. We know whose arms are waiting. Too often we carry shame around like a second skin. Done. Believing that our falls disqualify us from God's love. That once we've messed up, turned away, fallen short, the door is closed. Done. But that's not the heart of God. His arms are not reserved for the perfect. They're not only open to the consistent, the strong, the never struggling. Done. His arms are stretched wide for the broken, the weary, the ones who said they'd never fall again, and did, again and again, and still he's there. Done. God's grace is not a backup plan. It's the original blueprint. He knows we're going to fall. He saw the whole path before we ever stepped on it. Done. And yet he still calls us, still draws us, still whispers our name in love. He doesn't flinch when we fall. He reaches. He catches. He covers. Because grace isn't just for the mountaintop moments. It's for the pit, the valley, the cold floor of rock bottom. Done. That's where his presence is most powerful, most personal. The enemy wants you to believe that falling is the end. That you've failed too many times. Done. Wandered too far, made too many wrong turns. But God sees the fall as an invitation. It's a moment where walls come down, where pride dissolves, where we finally admit, I can't do this without you. And in that moment, he meets us, not with judgment, but with mercy. Not with distance, but with closeness. He doesn't ask us to climb back up before we're worthy again. He meets us on the ground and lifts us in love. Done. It's in the fall that we remember we are not our achievements, our titles, or our image. We are children. And like any loving parent, God does not scold us for falling. He comforts us, restores us, and teaches us how to walk again. He doesn't expect us to never trip. He teaches us how to fall into him. Because the fall, as painful as it may be, creates space for connection. It reminds us of our need. It pulls us back into the arms that never left. There are lessons in the fall that victory can't teach. There is clarity in the crash. There is intimacy in the unraveling. Sometimes it's only when we're lying face down that we truly look up. We strip away the noise, the ego, the masks. And what's left is our true, surrendered self. And that is the self God works with. That is the moment when his strength becomes perfect in our weakness. That is the turning point, not away from purpose, but deeper into it. Think of Peter, done walking on water, eyes locked on Jesus. For a moment, he stands above the waves, but then he falls. He doubts, he sinks. Yet Jesus doesn't let him drown. He reaches out immediately and pulls him up. That's the picture we hold on to, not of a perfect disciple, but of a faithful Savior. Not of a man who never failed, but of a God who never stopped reaching. Your fall doesn't cancel the call. Your failure doesn't void the invitation. Done. Falling also changes how we see others. It softens us. When you've fallen and been caught by grace, done, you're less likely to judge someone else's descent. You stop throwing stones. You start extending hands. Done. You become a living testimony that no one is too far gone, that mercy still speaks, that restoration is still possible. And in that way, done. Your fall becomes someone else's lifeline. Your recovery becomes someone else's roadmap. Because the arms that caught you are big enough to catch them. Done. Too. This journey is not about staying upright every moment. It's about knowing where to turn when you don't. Done. It's about trusting that God is not just at the finish line. He's right there in the fall. He's present in the moment of collapse. Done. In the breathless sobs, in the silence that follows the impact. He's not keeping a record of how many times you hit the ground. Done. He's watching for the moment your heart turns back toward him, ready to wrap you up in the kind of love that restores and rebuilds. Done. There's something deeply human about wanting things to change quickly. We want closure after heartbreak, answers after confusion, wholeness after trauma. Done. We want the pain to stop as soon as it starts, for the weight to lift, for the scars to vanish. But God doesn't always work on our timetable. He often chooses process over immediacy, depth over speed. His healing is not a flash of lightning. It's often the slow dawn after a long night. Done. But just because it's not instant doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because you can't feel it doesn't mean he isn't moving. Done. Healing with God is a layered work. It's not just about physical recovery or emotional repair. It's about making you whole from the inside out. Done. It's about addressing the roots, not just the fruit. Sometimes what we think needs healing is just a symptom, and God goes deeper than that. Done. He works through time, through tears, through truth. Done. He takes the shattered pieces and fits them back together in a way that doesn't erase the cracks, but fills them with grace. Done. There are wounds we carry that can't be seen, silent scars, hidden pain, memories we've locked away. And when God begins his healing work, done, he doesn't just patch us up. He invites us to face what we buried. He walks us back through the places we tried to forget, not to shame us, done, but to redeem them. He wants us to know that we're not alone in any part of our story. Done. That his presence stretches back to the places we thought he missed. That every moment, every tear, every ache has been accounted for. Healing also requires participation. God doesn't force us into wholeness. He invites us into it. That means being honest, being open, being willing to go where it hurts. It means showing up when we'd rather run, staying still when everything in us wants to retreat. Healing is holy ground, but it's not always comfortable. It involves forgiveness, not just of others, but of ourselves. Done. It requires letting go, not just of what was done to us, but of who we became in response. And through it all, God is gentle. He doesn't rush. He doesn't push. He waits and he walks with us. There are days in the healing process that feel like progress, and there are days that feel like regression. You may have moments where you feel strong, done, and then moments where the pain resurfaces, and you wonder if you've gone backward. But that's part of the journey. Healing is not linear. It loops, done. It spirals, it ebbs and flows. But even in the steps that feel like setbacks, God is still at work. Even when you feel stuck, he's still moving things forward. His hands never stop shaping, mending, restoring. God uses all kinds of tools in the healing process. Done. Sometimes it's through prayer and presence. Sometimes through community and conversation. Sometimes through counseling, through rest, through revelation. He's not limited to one method. He can use silence to speak. He can use stillness to move. He can use broken people to help bring healing to others. Done. And often it's in the vulnerability of our own healing that we become instruments of healing for someone else. What you've walked through becomes the very path someone else will follow. There's also a sacred strength that grows in the process. You begin to realize that healing isn't just about feeling better. It's about becoming whole. Done. It's about reclaiming the pieces of yourself that were lost or stolen. It's about remembering your worth, restoring your voice, rebuilding your faith. And as you walk through it, you become more aware of God's faithfulness. Done. You see how he's held you together in places where you should have fallen apart. You feel his nearness not just in the good days, but in the gritty, honest ones. You learn to trust not in outcomes, but in his presence. Healing with God is never wasted time. Even in the waiting, even in the wilderness, he is preparing something within you. He's not just healing what happened. He's preparing you for what's ahead. There's purpose in the process. The slow work of God is not a sign of neglect, but of intentional care. He's building something that can last. He's forming roots that won't be shaken by future storms. He's anchoring your identity not in pain, but in promise. You may not always recognize the progress. You may not see the change day to day, but just like seeds growing underground, there's movement even when there's no immediate evidence. God doesn't start something he won't finish. And every time you show up, every time you choose to trust, every time you whisper his name through the tears, healing is happening. So no, brokenness is not a curse. It's not a punishment. It's not the end of the road. It's the turning point. It's the place where God steps in and says, now, let me show you what I can do. God bless you.